While in her embrace, I turned up towards Scarlet and asked, "Are you ready to get out of here?" She looked at me, pushed me back a little bit, and asked how. She began talking, claiming how the guards will come running the moment they feel any power of resonance. Even if she had her wings and her tail, she didn't know if she had the ability to face them all. I immediately spoke over her and said, "Not alone," and continued with, "Also, to get out of this shithole, I have to be complete, and so do you." She looked at me confused. I backed away from her a little bit and began to focus. I would now reveal a secret that I had kept, even from her. This body was actually created by taking my original body, condensing it, and using it to impregnate Scarlet. This means that all my original parts actually remains, juiced up by the fact that I am now a demon, an incubus to be exact. Being the case, what do most personnel do before they sleep, before they go to bed? Anyone that is too exhausted from the day is going to do, just to make sure they sleep, an activity that will spike their dopamine and the resulting crash that will make their energy levels drop and allow them to go into a peaceful slumber. This is peak time for this. I had been drawing this energy for weeks, months possibly, but now I'm pulling in all the resonance from the surrounding area and mixing it inside of me, and the true secret is revealed. At first, Scarlet looked horrified as the resonance of blaze began to burn around me. Blaze had been resting in my heart. Though my heart had been liquefied by that bullet, it was still a part of my body, still in there. A body used to create this one. The flames enveloped me as a pain beyond comprehension erupted from my back. My demonic wings, my draconic wings, all burst forth along with my tail. As I am only using a 3-year-old body, they are not big enough to actually fly, yet they are definitely still present. My tail is not actually a demon's tail, as one would think, but shaped like a demonic tail, but thick like a dragon's tail. If I had not received the memories of my past existences, I probably would have broke down screaming from the pain at this point. Because as they pushed forward, as they ripped through the flesh, as they continued to extend, every single nerve not only was fresh and new, but was tearing at the same time. Now, with all my memories of the training, all the pain of combat, my mind simply shut off the pain sensor inside, and all I felt was hot and cold and blood running down my back, running down my legs, and unfortunately down the crack of my ass. It was all painful for sure, but the sudden influx of power was required. The Phoenix Flames reached out to Scarlet as well. She was a bit nervous until the tongues of fire began to caress all around her body. I could see her muscles began to repair themselves. The full health returned to her eyes as she was in a state of malnutrition. And now, in a flash of flesh and blood, her wings and tail shot out of her back with so much force that blood sprayed across the wall behind her. With that sudden burst, initially her body shot up as though she was cracked with several whips at the same time, and then she fell forward onto the ground in so much pain that she didn't even make noise. That is when the tongues of flame continued to lick around her back and the base of her tail all the way around. Each time they passed by, they healed her absolutely perfect form. And in just a few moments, she stood again. This time, spreading out her wings almost triumphantly to see them, turning back and forth to see that they were still there, that this was not a dream. The wings accentuated her fit and curvaceous figure, and any lesser man would have already lost control themselves in that moment looking at her and instantly drained themselves at just the image in front of them. Scarlet was amazed, but I needed her help. In order to spread this power, I needed more, continuous, more power. We headed and turned to face the door, and sure enough, we could hear the security coming down. And then they rushed in, only to find us waiting. All of them rushed in the door and paused at the sight of Scarlet. Even the women paused right there. 7 of the 9 instantly lost control and ejected inside their clothing with extreme pressure. The rest were barely hanging on in that moment, and Scarlet and I walked up to the other ones still standing, but they were simply in shock. Once Scarlet and I were within arm's reach, we removed the remainder of their sexual energy permanently. Those on the ground burst so violently again that their bodies just couldn't take it. Like an overdose of epinephrine, their hearts beat so hard as they flailed around that their hearts simply exploded in the chest, on top of exploding in other ways. Those on their feet tried to fight back, but going hand to hand with a mature succubus, and of course an incubus, is a very bad idea. Their desire had already made them slow and sluggish, and one simple touch is enough to send them to the ground convulsing just like the rest, releasing not only a dangerous and inevitably lethal amount of fluids, but enough sensual energy that any normal person would have their red chakra burning so bright it might as well be a red dwarf star. Thinking about it in that moment, I was actually grateful that this body was only 3, as I would not be able to disguise my reaction to so much of this energy passing in. At that point, Scarlet and I just walked past the dead and the rest of those in their final death convulsions and headed towards the central galley. We hurried, collected energy along the way from everyone doing their nocturnal activities. Pushing through the doors to the galley, I stood on a table in the center and said, "This'll have to do." And I turned towards Scarlet. I said, "Cover me while I move." She turned and responded, "I've got you covered." I move a lot because using this much energy is such a strain on a young body. It's dangerous at best. Lighting myself with the healing flames again, I end up floating from the resonance and the power, and also the attached wings that seem to be pushing me up even without moving. Above the table, I am now levitating, my body convulsing as I send out the tongues of fire to every part of the facility, a facility of horror. As my body jerked and flipped in the air, my consciousness was separate, and I could suddenly see everywhere that my power was going as it reached out, down each hallway, under each door, across the field to the other wings, into the windows, even the slightest crack I could go into. My mind was everywhere at the same time. My mind, my consciousness, my soul reached out with almost no limits, and what I saw was a shock to even me, every time hardening my resolve for what I had to do. Seemingly going into every room at the same time, I could see that in several rooms, the staff of the facility are taking advantage of their position. My flaming tongues slither under the door to see one of the guards violating, forcing himself on a young male demon, while another holds the boy down by the arms and shoulders, giving instructions, and seems to laugh at the boy's pain and the fact that he is basically catatonic at this point. His mother is in the corner on one of the chairs, beaten, bloody, barely conscious, and with tears running down her face and with someone else's fluids currently running down one of her legs. Next to her, sitting close, actually holding on to her, was a very well dressed man in a different uniform. I looked for a moment and I could see that is an old knight's uniform. The strange glazed armor, the katana on his side, the look of arrogance and superiority, sitting there, pants down, almost proud of his limited manhood that is still moist from his previous activity. He still sits there with that grin as he smokes some sort of goofy looking pipe. It's a good thing I can't smell because I don't want to know what the hell he's actually smoking. And he watches as the other two continue to assault this gelded demon boy. They cannot see the tongues at first. They do not glow, but they are there. That is, until the flame looking pieces actually touch them. All the men, everyone in the entire room begin to freak out, and everyone is seemingly touched all over by these tongues. I did not enjoy this sensation at all, and they tried to use their magic to try and push my consciousness away, my flame that was reaching out, but all of a sudden, they lack the ability to stand, and as they fall, they begin to explode all over without any physical contact. And they just continue to do so over and over and over again, regardless of the pain that they feel, regardless of the pain that starts to rip through their entire body that they mistake as pleasure. All the while, the boy is catatonic after such an experience, and his mother, I had guessed, is still unresponsive. That is when my flames begin to cover them both. Recycling the energy from the men, I rebuild them both. I purge the vile fluids inside the female demon violently. I mend her wounds. I fix her bones, even those that had not healed right. I regrow her canine teeth that had been ripped out of her skull. But she didn't respond until she felt the pain of her own wings and tail grow back violently. Just the same as with Scarlet, she fell forward and blood was sprayed behind her, but I immediately began to fix her up. The pain as she screamed was intense, but it was fleeting, and she was able to rise again, now fully restored. As this happened, the boy was rebuilt as well. New horns, new teeth, not just the canines, but all the teeth that had been ripped out of his skull, the replacement fingers that had been broken and ripped off. In one case, it felt like they were twisted and pulled off with pliers. He also screamed, almost like a little girl, as his new wings and tail burst out of him. Yet that is not the reason he actually smiled when he stood up. He smiled because he realized that his two best friends had been regrown. Once he could stand, he and his mother looked down at the men that were near helpless on the floor. I retracted away now the job was done, and as both of the mother and son extended their claws, picked the men up, and the boy tossed the two assaulters into the same position he was just a few moments before, the two guards funnily sound themselves with red-hot claws slicing at their hands. Since demons can naturally deal with fire, these claws cauterize the wounds and cauterize them shut so they would not bleed out. There, as the men were face down, but they could see their now severed stumps that used to hold their hands, they were now the ones who were catatonic. And that is when the demon boy reached out with both hands and violent removed a pair of something from each of those men, laughing as he did this, instantly moving his hands vertically so he smeared the blood up above where he just ripped pieces off, and he seemed to be preparing to give them some sort of poetic justice. His mother was now much taller than he was, and raised the knightly asshole that had assaulted her by his neck, and then reached down with another claw, grabbed his thigh, and lifted him up sideways. I was nearly outside the door at this point as I was still retracting away. That's when she shot her face forward, fangs first, towards his groin. I had now retracted out of the room as I heard flesh tear and rip, followed by the sound of something spat out on the floor with a solid haktua. This disgusted me, and it was not the only room, nor was it just the men. In another wing, my flame had slid in through a window, and now I could see a woman was forcing a mermaid to stay directly under her. This bottomless woman had firmly placed herself over the face of the mermaid, crotch first. The woman was screaming instructions and demands, saying things like, "Don't talk, don't bitch. I know you don't have to come up for air, keep going." In a mix of the normal, deeper, faster, and of course, not there. I recognized this mermaid. She always treated me well. She treated me like a child, too. And because of her motherly demeanor towards me, made this sight even more disturbing for me. I could see that the only reason that the mermaid could not fight back is her lack of fins. They had all been severed, meaning that her resonance just couldn't function. It's the same with a human losing his hands, or if I lost different parts of me, although the parts that I need are more internal. Though if I lost my wings or my tail, truly I wouldn't be able to perform resonance very well at all. As before, I went in with my tongues and began to work. At first, the woman just believed that the mermaid was doing a better job all of a sudden as she felt all the different sensations. She was so engrossed in these sensations that she did not see the flame fixing and repairing the one she was currently assaulting. With every human convulse of pleasure, the power that's released is aiding me, and I simply recycle it and repair her captor. As I finish up, I see the mermaid realizing what is happening. She reaches down with one of her hands and feels the fins down on her strange-shaped leg that doubles as a fin, and she realizes that her side fins are there. They're back for the first time. I can see the way she's moving. I can't read her mind, but she's stroking the fins down her side, and she can't understand that they're back. They're back. I begin to retract as I realize that the woman that is forcibly on top of the mermaid is gushing out with so much force that she can't actually feel the water building up. It's going completely unnoticed. I see the mermaid's fins beginning to glow, the bioluminescence that signifies power of a mermaid. Every time they use any type of power, it is easy to see. It's well within the visual spectrum. I retract all the way as a burst of water erupts from the mermaid's mouth with such force that the woman is catapulted to the ceiling with a very audible thud and crunch, almost as loud as the audible thud and crunch from when she comes back down. I left a few moments later, but not before seeing that the force of the water had actually liquefied the lower internal organs of that woman. She laid limp, and I thought to myself, if she survives, doesn't matter what she gets for healing, she will never, ever be able to use that part of her body right ever again. This was all happening at the same time as I rebuilt the fairies and pixies, putting their wings back and their antennas on their heads. I fixed the internal and external scars like those of my elf neighbor, returning the lost hand of the humans that were held there, making new teeth and claws for the lycanthropes and others like them. Yet one of the most satisfying was healing the kelpie mummy that had her child taken away from her and had been turned into some rich asshole's dinner. As I worked on her, I realized that her ethereal body is rather complex, but not impossible to figure out. It would just take longer to heal her. I don't know why, but she was amazingly calm through the entire process. I could tell she knew what was going on, but she barely moved. She even turned into her human form while I worked. Surprisingly, this made things easier as now I knew where all the parts were. When I was done, I retracted away, and she transformed again into the pale gray horse like creature she always wanted to be, as she sent out a screaming whinny, a cross between a horse whinny and a young woman's scream in pain and fury. And I knew with that the game was well and truly on. I returned to myself after that, retracting the tongues of fire, and once I did, I landed on the table with a very loud and painful thud, thinking to myself, oh, and I thought airborne school was bad. Yet this young body didn't just feel the pain from this strike, no. The body screamed at me as though I had just sprinted through a Tough Mudder a dozen times while performing advanced yoga for 18 hours straight. As I lay there in extreme pain that doesn't just overload my pain sensors, but completely fries them. As I'm laying there, I look over and I can see that Scarlet is coming to check and see what's going on. Am I back? Am I still alive? I can't move. Barely even my eyes can move. And as she comes over, I just think that she somehow got even more gorgeous while I was out of it. Around her, though, are the shriveled remains of the rest of the night guard. As I slowly got myself up, very, very slowly, Scarlet looks at me and asks if I'm all right. Then she hears all the screams of defiance and rage from all around the facility. I look around to the bodies of the men and women, all completely drenched in their own fluids, each one also very, very dead. I look at her and grin a little bit as I say, "You've been busy." She replied, "Not as busy as you." Scarlet said this as she tried to actually get me up and moving, but all I can do is basically sit up and not move. I am beyond spent and trying desperately not to puke. I'm barely able to stay upright at that point anyway. Scarlet looks at me with those worried eyes and said, "The rest of the guards, if there's any, will be here soon. I'm not sure if I can take them all without help." In that moment, before I can even speak, I can hear thunder rumbling outside. I can hear it rolling in more and more as the storm moves in. I grin, a very menacing grin that made Scarlet a bit nervous and questioning. I say, "Don't worry, I've got it covered." The storm outside, we could see through the big glass window above us. The storm built up more and more and more as the thunder rolled and the lightning began to strike, and it came in closer and closer, and there are soon lightning bolts flashing continuously as though it's a fireworks show. The crash of thunder makes Scarlet cover her ears as it simply bounces around this open concrete room. I begin to laugh uncontrollably as the flashes and explosions in the atmosphere, the shaking of the facility with every single strike simply reminds me of every time I faced heavy artillery. Even as direct strikes of lightning bolts began to break the building apart around us, I simply started to laugh harder and harder and harder. In a moment, the power in the facility completely stopped, and the backup power refused to turn on, and I knew exactly what that meant. The entire electrical system had been burnt out to include batteries. A few seconds later, through the large glass dome over us, I saw it. The Thunderbird. I had found it deep in the facility and I had fixed it, and now it is taking flight through the storm, surrounded by bolts of 1.21 gigawatts, propelling it up into the sky. It was beautiful. Somehow, they had captured a Thunderbird. I didn't even know it was possible. But since they had captured it, they had removed its wings. And because it couldn't use its resonance anymore, it limited this glorious creature, this glorious Thunderbird, to nothing more than a living battery. And now that I had restored its wings, it had got its power back. And after beating treated so poorly, it's pissed. Rightfully so. And it's going to make one hell of a distraction as everybody escapes. Scarlet then asked me about the others. I told her that when the Thunderbird actually broke free, it fried everything to include the door locks. And every single bit of the security is down. And with everybody getting their residence back, well, it's time to get this party started. With the door locks malfunctioning, everybody's doors open, just like the cells of Alcatraz. Prisoners and staff begin to mix. For a couple of moments, there is no sound, which stands to reason because to everyone this is going to be a shock, but the no sound suited me just fine as I was so completely exhausted that I was hardly holding on at this point. And just as I was getting enough energy in me to move, a group of staff, not guards, but just workers, came in. Scarlet put the majority of them on the floor with just a look. There was one that paused and seemed to be able to fight this off. I could barely move, but I could see it looked like a rather masculine female. Actually, no, I realized. Though it's dark, my night vision was finally kicking in, and I could see it's an actual female-ish orc that was able to fight off what Scarlet was giving them, the resonance, and she shot at Scarlet. I tried to move as the shots rang out from the pulse pistol, but I can't move. I can barely lift my arms. I'm about to fall back onto this table. Scarlet flies up and into the shadows to get away. With her full power now restored, her movements are fast. Sudden changes of movements, move left, right, up, down, so fast that this orc bitch just can't keep up as she keeps trying to move the pulse weapon over this way, that way. Like a predator that is fully aware of the danger she's in, Scarlet moves around. And then Scarlet is out of sight when the orc walks up to me, grabs my shoulder, and puts the pulse pistol to my head. She starts screaming for Scarlet to show herself and surrender, or else. I can feel the slight metallic and Palmer pushing up against the side of my head, but I still can't move. Though it's difficult to move completely, I was still able to get enough energy to reach up and grab her shirt and pull it down. And at that point, I was the one that aimed for the bullseye. The orc was a bit shocked at first, but then said, "That's not so bad." Just as she put her hand on the back of my head to pull me in, enough of her desire arose that I could use it. I began to refill myself. Then I used refraction of the intimate energy back on her, and the orc suddenly started shaking, as it was clear that it was almost now impossible for her to even stand. Her grip on me and the pulse weapon faded into nothing, and down she went. As she was on the ground convulsing, I could not see through her clothes, but I could see moisture in her clothes. And for a moment, I wondered, is she really female, considering the direction of the fluid? I didn't have time to investigate, honestly, and I really didn't want to, as screams of horror began to echo down at the hallways and across the facility. The sterile, long hallways allowed the noise to travel unfiltered. The sounds of fear, the sounds of flesh tearing, the cries of pain, the screams begging for mercy. Yet there was no mercy to be had this night. Realizing backup is most likely on its way, we had to go. As Scarlet came in from the shadows, she landed right next to me, and she immediately began to ask about the others, saying all this that she cared about them, and I was trying to get back on my feet. And then she said something I can't forget. "We cannot just abandon them," she said. I paused for a moment, and then she said, "No one shall be left behind." That phrase triggered something in me, something that I had not felt in a very long time. Something that had been drilled into me for decades. Something I believed down to my very own soul. Something that I had lived an entire life by, and something I will never deny. I paused, and with as much power as I could muster, I sent out another set of flames. But these were not to caress, these were not to fix anybody. They were stretched out and glowing as much as they could as I sent them down the hallway. Being that there's no electricity, which means there's no light, these glowing lines that are as bright as a fire will be actually as bright as a flare in people's eyes, each of them following it, and this would lead them right back to me and Scarlet. Yet I could only send them out for a short amount of time before I retracted them. Thankfully, they all followed these flames straight to me. Because of this, they realized I was the one to save them from a fate that seemed to be even more cruel than death. And at that point, as somebody mentioned it, I had to agree. As the former prisoners all showed up, they obviously had questions as they ran in, but Scarlet immediately raised her wings up, screamed out, got their attention, and got them all to work. After I had actually retracted the flame myself, I was so tired. I was actually seeing double and hoping I don't fall off this table because that's tile down there. There's no give. Falling back onto my ass every time I stood up, I looked up and said, "If you want to survive, listen, there's strength in numbers. You're free to do it alone, but if you rush and do things stupid, you're most likely going to get caught again. If you want to leave with us, listen, grab whatever linens, bags, or containers you can. Pack them with as much food and clothing as you can. Hey, listen, we have to go. We will be leaving in 10 minutes. I didn't even have to tell them to go. They all hurried up, which was extremely good, as I was actually so exhausted, I was about to throw up. Then I did. They also began to surprise me as I looked up, as certain creatures actually changed and maintained forms that could actually carry more equipment. Not forms they wanted to be in for sure. And let's face it, who the hell wants to be a pack mule? But just like the Kelpie turning into the horse, or the mermaid adjusting herself to legs so that she could actually carry a pack, the pixies and fairies who worked together to fly bags full of food and other provisions. I kept saying the same thing over and over again every time they passed by. Food, clothing. That's it. Food, clothing. That's it. Every time they stopped and asked me a question, I would try to answer, but I tried to also motion that they needed something on their feet. Though the slippers that we were are hardly footwear, a few of us are in dire need of actual shoes. Those of us that actually can't run across questionable terrain in bare feet need to double, triple, quadruple wrap the different types of slippers so that we didn't tear the feet up. Everybody scavenged what they could, but there was only so many sets of shoes that they could actually get off the guards. Unfortunately, that barely covered 40% of who actually needed them. And that's going to have to do. Clothing is also limited, yet most of us prefer just not to wear any, as our natural form is natural. This lightens our load a bit, and our burden's not going to be so high. Still, we're going to require blankets, lots of blankets, and these can get heavy. And even if they're not heavy, they're going to be at least bulky. As the minutes passed by, my brain was able to get more clearer and clearer as we go, and I remembered something. I began to tie the blankets into bandoliers and actually put them around the children. This actually helped the young ones a lot because, well, now they could carry more, but they could also hold on to something warm, and this would help morale. I would have done more, but we are just out of time. We started yelling, 10 minutes are up, 10 minutes are up, we gotta go. A few broke the wall with their own abilities, and we began to leave. And as we stepped out, I began to feel the grass under my feet for the first time, and I forgot how long. This was both nostalgic and liberating. The cool night air, and as everybody breathed in the smell of freedom, definitely gave everybody a boost in morale. I would have done the same thing, but I was still beyond tired and just barely on my feet. But not too tired to hear the scream of something in the distance. Something that was almost avian. Something that made us all freeze in fear. We stopped and looked up towards the left where we heard the screams coming from, and we could see them. We could see them against the backdrop of the clear night sky. The Griffin riders were approaching, and they were approaching fast. We only had a few minutes, and they would be on us. For a moment, we were all simply just frozen there to the ground, but something in me took over. All those years of training, of leading, kicked in with straight-up muscle memory. I turned and ordered all the children to head into the forest as fast as they can. Women will stay close to them. All the women will be there to protect them. I just turned and said, "Men, ready the weapons." With the limited amount of pathetic pulse weapons we have, the best we can do is hope the magic we have holds out after the pulse weapons fail so that the others can get away. We all knew it, and I could see it in their eyes that they just at least wanted a piece, even just a small piece before they go down. I looked over and told Scarlet to go, but she wouldn't leave me as I looked at the men steeling themselves. The human who had his hand ripped off flexed it several times, wrapped it around the pulse weapon, and I saw that look in his eyes. I've seen that look before. This is the look of a man who's done this before, who had hoped his days of doing it were behind him. But now, even though he dreaded it, he looked forward to his time of killing. That's when I saw another human using an ability that I didn't understand. Somehow he was levitating 4 different pulse pistols at the same time and disassembled them, and then reassembled them into one larger weapon, each piece seeming to click into place one by one, but very quick, as though you're listening to popcorn pop. Once he was done, it looked like an old musket with a whole bunch of electronics sticking out of it. When asked what he made, he said it was a one-shot pulse cannon, yet he didn't actually have the energy, not the resonance to use it. He offered it to anyone else to use it, but everybody was afraid to actually use this thing. They didn't even know what was going on. I ran over immediately, grabbed it, placed it up against my shoulder, and aimed, forcing all my remaining energy into it, which honestly wasn't much. I could hear it begin to rise in power. The men that put it together walked over and began to adjust things on it, changing things, seeming to turn things on and shut safeties off. And then I felt myself start to wane. I didn't have enough of me left over to actually get this thing to work. And that is when I felt those soft, clawed hands at my shoulder. I didn't even have to look, and I knew who it was, and she was supporting me just as I supported her all that long ago. And as her resonance actually flowed through me and into the weapon, I felt the weapon to get very, very hot. I took careful aim and aimed for the center of the formation, and that's when I squeezed the trigger. The pulse beam that came out had a kick behind it like that of a real cannon, which put me not just on my ass, but completely on my back in severe pain as I thought for sure, okay, this thing just broke my collarbone. The pulse went into the griffins, and the lead griffin saw this, pulled away very quickly, allowing 2 behind it to take direct hits, and another 3 to take damage enough where they headed towards the ground. A good solid hit, but not nearly enough. As I laid there, barely able to move, another man ran over towards the weapon. This time, he tried to pick it up so he could fire the cannon again, only to burn his hands, and I could actually smell almost bacon grease in the air as he started screaming. I looked over as the 3rd-degree burns, and then realized that the cannon itself was glowing hot. I personally could barely move as 24 more griffins were approaching. In that moment, I figured, well, in a couple minutes, I'm going to have another check in with that guardian angel. Around me, all the others scrambled to defensible positions, anything to hide behind so that they could actually get a few shots off before they themselves were taken out. As they did so, I thought I was passing out for a moment, but then I realized that the high amount of lume from the moons of this planet suddenly were not there anymore. I looked over a little bit and I could see that the clouds were rolling across the sky. Inside the clouds were cracks of thunder. Thunder that got louder and louder as the thunder rolls and the lightning strikes. There, inside the flash, was the flash of a silhouette. The silhouette of something big, something flying, something alive, and something very, very pissed off. I smile as the Thunderbird goes after the Griffin Raiders with insane fury. Trying to get up, I yelled, "We've got to go! Now!" Unfortunately for me, as I got to my feet and tried to run, I ended up face planting due to the lack of energy. I laid there for a moment thinking, damn, I can't even watch the show. And that's when Scarlet picks me up, and she holds me like a baby in her arms and takes up to the skies with a sudden burst of her wings. I look down, and I can see the men hastily loading up the centaur and grabbing the other bags with supplies as we try to catch up to the group. Held in close to Scarlet's firm, soft, and bountiful embrace, I finally lose consciousness. Awakening, I look around and I see a hasty shelter made of linens and blankets. For a moment, I think that I'm back in one of those old forts I used to make as a kid. It was the last time I ever felt innocent, at peace with the world. Yet the hard dirt I was sleeping on told me otherwise. Pulling and pushing myself up, I looked over at my hands, and I could see that my hands were more like hands than claws, but they're definitely not human. My feet especially. I look over my body. The reddish tone of my skin made it look almost like I had got sunburn across my entire body, and I mean all of it. As I wiped my face, I felt the small horns on the top of my forehead as I grazed them, and a flick of my wings finally brought me all the way back into the reality of right now. As I sat there, I stretched my wings, and I popped a few of my joints, making me wonder how long I was out. 3-year-olds shouldn't have achy joints like this. I had a rough idea as I realized that my tail was actually asleep. Not too shocked, actually, due to the fact that I slept on the damn thing. A bit surprised that my back actually didn't hurt, since the tail was actually placed, well, directly between the cheeks and sticking out almost down to my knees. I chuckled a little bit because I know this is the reason why demonic tails are actually so thin. But I have draconic resonance, but dragons never sleep on their back. They're always curled up in this strange circular ball thing, almost like a giant scaly turd. Crawling out of the makeshift tent, I finally could stand all the way up. I stretched out in the sun and finally extended my wings and my tail as far as they could. The mixture of sun and the stretch felt oh so good. And that is when someone yelled for me, and then yelled for Scarlet, screaming, "He has awakened! He has awakened!" Not knowing what in the hell was going on, I just stood there as this motley crew of misfits ran over to greet me to see if I was okay. None faster, though, than the naked woman with wings that landed right in front of me, immediately got down onto her knees and hugged me tight. So tight, in fact, I had to actually say, "Scarlet, sweetheart, I can't breathe." She did loosen her grip, but she didn't stop hugging me. When I asked everybody why everybody was in such a rush, Scarlet just squeezed me even tighter as one of the pixies told me that I had actually been in a coma for 4 full days. Well, that explained the headache, I said. As Scarlet seemed to be crying tears of happiness, I assured her I was fine, reaching over and giving her a hug as well, reaching up behind her back and rubbing her right next to her wings, right as I used to do when she was young. Then I asked him a simple question. Anybody got any water? Scarlet at that point finally relented the hug, and I began filling myself with as much fluid as his body could handle. We moved over towards the fire that was burning, and I continued to drink as they made me some food, mostly scavenged berries and fish from the river that we were currently next to. As I ate, many kept thanking me for restoring them, and I kept waving it off because, honestly, I had a mouthful. A couple of the fairies actually sat on my shoulder and made some suggestive comments that how they could repay me for what I'd done. I had to remind them that this body is still only 3 years old. Hell, I still haven't even outgrown the halflings yet. Scarlet also got them to back off with just a look, but not before they told me that they would be waiting. It was about that time that I swallowed hard and I asked how they thrive so well. They all look well fed. They don't look damaged at all. What happened? That is when they told me that Scarlet had actually taken command as I was passed out cold. She kept morale up. She made sure that they rationed food so they didn't run out, assigning jobs, making sure that they could collect the bounty that was around them, and basically every lesson that she had learned the first time we were on the run. She used every single lesson. When I looked at her, she was sitting up straight and proud, even with her wings flared out just a little bit, and she should be proud. With that, I grasped her arm and pulled her close and actually thanked her again for being her. Yet they were all enjoying this location next to the river. They also knew that they'd been there for 2 days and they would need to actually be moving pretty soon. Then it hit me. I asked, "What about the facilities and the Griffin riders or the knights? What's going on?" They all found this very humorous that I suddenly started freaking out about this, but I was still very nervous. That is when they told me about the very, very pissed off Thunderbird. I had thought that it was just one. Apparently, no. It was the entire flock had come with it, and they had flocked everything up. A quick scout of the area actually showed that a bunch of griffin feathers were all that remained of most of the griffins themselves, though not as many bodies of the griffins as one might think, or their riders. However, there were a bunch of knights that actually got cooked in their own armor. Any tech that was there was completely and totally fried. And above all else, the facility had been razed to the ground. And this made me smile. After the meal, I wanted to clean up, so I headed towards the river. Many of the children were out there playing, and I just kind of stayed away from let them be kids. I swam into the river to try and wash myself off, using my tail and wings to aid me in propelling me across the water, and also diving down into this probably 6 feet deep water and simply pushing along, wanting to get to the other side. Once on the other side, I pulled myself up for a second before I made another lap back and forth. But when I pulled myself up, I could see a demoness laying out in the sun. She wasn't moving. I looked over, and the first thing you do is call out to see if they're okay. But when I asked if she was all right, she actually jumped up in fright. Realizing it was me, she simply relented, and she softened her expression. As I apologized for intruding and began to head back into the water, she asked if I was truly the one to restore her. When I told her yes, she got a very mischievous grin on her face. She thanked me profusely for saving not only her, but allowing her to take some revenge on those that wronged her and her son, confirming that she was, in fact, a demon mummy. She began to mention how she enjoyed the feeling of revenge. Then she began to explain what she did, and I had to halt her there for a moment, saying, "Ma'am, I could actually see the beginnings of what your revenge was, and I left as you were just getting started, but I'm aware of your Haktua." I looked at her at that point and she grinned again, this time even wider, and then she began laughing as she realized exactly what I was talking about. She thanked me again for restoring her and her son and actually came up and hugged me, which was clearly very soft and very pleasant, I'm not going to lie, but I immediately pulled away and swam back. I swam in the river for a while, back and forth, fighting the current, drifting along with it, fighting it again, stretching the muscles out, and just enjoying the water. After such a wonderful swim, I helped the others prepare for the cool nights. I looked over at their makeshift tents and I realized that Scarlet had not taught them everything. She taught them everything she knew. She didn't teach them everything I know. I had to show them how to make a bed from the foliage so they could get themselves off the cold ground, telling them how wide it should be, how thick it should be, and how it's going to help them from getting the shivers at night. Also, how to shore up their tents to make sure that the wind would not take them down. And afterwards, we all had our evening meal. Though I wasn't too keen about, just fruits and fish once again, I wasn't complaining. Not in the slightest. In fact, I was grateful. I thanked the pixies and the fairies that were able to use their own residence to ripen up fruits so that they could be eaten right now as they're not in season. I also thanked the kelpie and others that were able to get the fish that we were eating. Then again, just as we sat down, the teenage demon boy walked in with a dead hog over his shoulders. Seeing it, I knew that with some group effort, we were all going to eat extremely well that night. Although my first question was, "Why didn't you clean this thing?" He looked at me strange, and then I said, "Come here, I'll show you how it's done." He looked at me sideways a little bit, but after his mother told him I'm the one that gave him his nuts back, he calmed the hell down. Then I showed him the correct way to clean the hog, what parts are good, what parts are bad, what he can eat raw, which was pretty much nothing. And we put it out onto the fire, all the pieces out there, and we ate very, very well. As we ate, we talked about the next move. We knew we can't stay static for too long, or eventually we're going to be discovered. And once we're discovered, we're going to be attacked. With limited numbers and hardly any weapons outside our resonance, our greatest asset is staying hidden. And to do that, we need to stay mobile. But we can't just stay nomads, because once again, you're going to stumble across someplace you don't want to be. It will only work for a while, and we knew it. The debates on what to do go back and forth for a long time before one of the elves, a young-looking female, although they all look young regardless of age, had a hard time talking before, but she spoke up, and this kind of surprised everybody. She simply came over and said, "Excuse my interruption. Regarding your conversation, I stood up and said, "Come here, sit down. You don't have to worry. Please speak. Speak to all of us. We'll listen." I patted the log next to me as she sat down, and she stayed wrapped up in the blanket the entire time. I could tell that she was hesitant being around the adult men, but around me she seemed fine. She very hesitantly sat there, wrapped up in not only a blanket, but I found out a clearly makeshift dress. And she said, "You all seem to be contemplating a destination, a place where all of us may be safe from those that seek to imprison and she shudders with this, and I move in close and I hold her hand as tight as I can to try and comfort her. Thankfully, Several of the actual pixies come over and rest on her, one knocking a tear away from her cheek. And then, of course, one of the pixies comes over and actually hugs her. To top it all off, the Kelpie in her human form actually came over and held her tight. And all I could think is, aren't Kelpies murderous things? But now she's being so nice. But we got other things to worry about. What's going on? I personally moved away a little bit after all the ladies moved in, and I tell her to take her time. And all the other men look at me, and they just seem to know exactly what's going on, and they stay silent. They look, but they don't say a damn thing. Finally, she gets her word back as she continues, it's a vast distance away, for sure, but I know of one place we can go. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 9 of this ongoing series. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Julius Boone with Sally H1480 coming in a very close second. I also need to send out some great big thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Brian Kemp, Erica Chem, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, MTF Guard, and Joseph Blush. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting pilot.